Welcome once again, everybody, to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I am your host, Mike Frank, here with Jamie Uyeyama. We have Greg Flamong out there in not so sunny California producing the show. It's not so nice up there in Toronto, and it's definitely not so nice here in Nebraska. So
It's crappy weather everywhere, Mike.
I was told they can control the weather. That's what I was told. So if they can control the weather, why do we have such crappy weather? I've had enough of it. It's time to turn on the sun. Let's get back to where we were. All right, folks. Before we get going, I wanted to mention once again, it's a great time to sign up for irishsportsdaily.com. You can go to irishsportsdaily.com, click on the premium section, sign up. There's certainly a lot going to be happening here in the very new future with the portal. Notre Dame has had some players enter the portal, or at least say they're going to enter the portal when it opens. And we expect Notre Dame to be shopping for some portal players as well. So we'll have to see how that goes. Excited to see what is added. We'll talk about what is being subtracted here later today or in the show. Also wanted to mention, if you want to be an advertiser for our podcasts and our YouTube shows, you can contact me at mikefrank18@gmail.com. Once again, mikefrank18@gmail.com, and I'll give you details on how to do that. It's relatively cheap to do, and I think we've had a lot of success with that. So if you are interested in advertising something, please reach out to me. Also wanted to mention our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing, founded by ND alum Ge Wang, and Chicago's go-to for best custom suits, shirts, and sport coats. Now's the time to refresh your wardrobe and add the perfect suit, sport coat, tuxedo, and casual jacket for fall. ESQ's master tailors combine next-level craftsmanship with the finest fabrics to deliver a fit that's built just for you. Now with showrooms in downtown Chicago and in Winnetka, book your custom fitting and step into confidence with Chicago's finest. Mention ISD at your appointment and receive 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. All right, Yama, certainly lots going on. I wanted to say I hope everybody had a great Christmas and holiday, and hopefully everybody traveled safe and got home and had a good time with everything. But yeah, Jamie, I don't know. I don't know what to think at this point. There's a lot of I haven't been watching any of the games. As far as the bowl games, stuff like that. It's just one of these, I guess, dead period times, and when it's dead and there's not a lot of information, that's when the speculation starts. And there's speculation about portal, there's speculation about who's coming, who's going, all that type of stuff. The NFL, and then of course, with Marcus Freeman and NFL stuff there. I haven't heard anything new there. I guess if I look at it, the longer this goes, I'm not sure if that means that he's staying or if that means that there's something to worry about. You'll have Black Monday coming shortly, where there's going to be a lot more openings, and I think the big thing for Irish fans to remember here is there's just no reason to panic at this point, no reason to get too upset or too much anxiety. Marcus Freeman has mentioned many times he loves coaching at Notre Dame. Feels it's a blessing and an honor, and so we just have to hope that there is an extension or something that's announced fairly soon, and we could put all this to bed. But hasn't been much new. Didn't expect anything new. Everybody's on vacation. They're spending time with their families and things like that. So I think you'll see the staff start to get back into the mode of things here this week, and be very heavily involved in portal and all that type of stuff, and getting things going. Obviously, there's a linebacker coach position that needs to happen here, and so we'll just have to see what happens. Hopefully, this is all moving in a positive direction. Any thoughts on this so far?
Yeah, it's one of these things where, obviously, last year at this time, they had beaten Indiana. Everybody's getting ready for the Sugar Bowl against Georgia. And so if you're in the playoff, you're focusing on that. But I think even like the teams that are in bowl games, like there's so many opt-outs, and no one really cares. It's just true. Like no one really cares about most of the bowls that are going on. That um, it that occasionally there'll be something like you know, Sark replaced Pete Kwiatkowski with um uh God, what's his name? Muschamp, Will Muschamp.
Yeah.
Like that might come out of nowhere and surprise you, but there isn't a lot of stuff going on in terms of uh, right now. People are waiting for the other shoe to drop in terms of portal. There's a lot of like negotiations going on between a lot of people. There's only just uh it seems like, Chad Bowden, he's done the thing where they're doing like signing for the thing and making it a big deal about guys re-signing with the team. But there's not a lot of that going on either, because most of the time, like, guys are coming back and you just don't hear about it. It's just like it's not a public thing. Like they're not
Yeah. Yeah.
announcing it. So I think it's just like a wait and see mode. And I think the next thing to happen, obviously, is like you said, Black Monday for NFL. As soon as the NFL season's over, you start to see guys who are NFL assistants maybe come to college, or college assistants go to the NFL. And will there be, I know Marcus Freeman's been mentioned as a head coach, but there's other guys too that are going to be mentioned there, right? That as possible head coaches as well. And you'll have to see what jobs are open. But I think one of the things that has stood out to me, Mike, is that almost all of the jobs that will be open for the NFL, they're bad ownership. It's like it's bad management and ownership from the top. And I think one of those things that if you were looking at it from anyone's perspective, obviously people want those jobs. They're exclusive jobs, but they're not really great situations. Like the Tennessee Titans, that's not a good job. That's not a job that people want.
Well, it's interesting because people said the same thing about the Bears, and all it takes is a good coach, and a lot of people said, "Oh, I'd never go. Why would you take the Bears job? It's a disaster
Well, they had
program."
Caleb Williams, though, right?
Yeah, well, I know that, and I mean, obviously, but let's be honest, Caleb Williams wasn't lighting the world on fire until Johnson got there. He was not lighting the world on fire. He was playing terrible. A lot of people thought he was a bust. So again, I'm not playing devil's advocate here. I'm just saying that, I don't know a coach who goes into a situation and takes a job that says
they always think they're going to be
I'm the guy that can fix it. You know what I mean? So, and again, I'm please don't read that into anything, or like I'm saying that, that's what Marcus Freeman's thinking. I don't know what any of that is. I don't know. And until Marcus Freeman says something, I don't think anybody knows what the situation is. And maybe he won't say anything at all. That's certainly a possibility. Everybody we just keep going and doing what we're doing. And maybe there's nothing that needs to be said. But I know there's a lot of speculation, and the speculation doesn't help the situation, in my opinion, because it's like, look, if you're out there trying to recruit portal kids, right, and you're out there saying, hey, come on, we want you here, and they keep hearing all this speculation, and they're like, every other school is going to be like, well, this guy might not even be here in 2 weeks. Why would you go there? And so this is why I think it's important for something to be said fairly soon, is because it gives people the reassurance that, hey, you are committed to Notre Dame, you're going to be there. And so again, we'll just hopefully that's in the plans here, and they'll get to that, and it's all for naught. No reason for people to be concerned. We have heard certainly that Notre Dame is out there trying to find portal people. They're having negotiations with their own current players, and I think that those are going really well. Sounds like according to Matt Freeman, who was our kind of beat writer on Irish Sports Daily, things have gone really well in that regard, and we expect people back who they'd hope to have back. Really, the only two that I think you'd like to really have back that maybe hit the portal would be Billy Schrauth going to the NFL, and maybe Joshua Burnham, potentially going somewhere else. To be honest with you, I don't blame Burnham if he decides to go, because he can go somewhere and be a 3-down starter somewhere and really help build his career. And it's the same decision that Rocco Spindler had, same one that Pat Coogan had. And, those two certainly worked out well for them. And so this is what you're going to see moving forward. You're going to see a lot of quality depth looking for opportunities out the door. And that's just the reality of it. And then you're going to have to try and re-recruit some quality depth to come and help you fill some holes as well. So, I think Josh Burnham's a good player. I hate to see him go, but I understand why he would. And I would not argue with that decision if he left. I'd say, hey, that makes a lot of sense. If I'm your agent, I'd tell you to do the same because you have a great opportunity. We assume he'll be graduated. You'll have the great opportunity to go start somewhere, and that's what those guys need an opportunity to do, to show that, hey, I'm an NFL quality player, and so we'll see what happens and go from there. When you look at the guys who've kind of declared they're going into the portal, I don't see a single surprise to you, and I don't anticipate any surprises other than Burnham. Burnham was probably the only surprise to me if he decides to do that, but it's not really surprising considering the situation. So I think Notre Dame's done a really good job so far of holding on to the key elements that they're looking for. We expect Boubacar Traore to end up at Notre Dame. We expect I'm just trying to think off the top of my head guys that could potentially go. I mean, like, yeah, Adon Schuler, sure. That's certainly one. And we expect Christian Gray to come back and some of these others that we've mentioned. So Jaden Greathouse and we expect those guys to be back. So I think they've done a good job and they're set up for a good run. And I think that is one of the biggest things that Notre Dame has going in their favor right now is that, Marcus Freeman has to look at this situation and say, you know what, I got a great chance to win the national championship, because when you look at the schedule, Jamie, there's a great chance to go undefeated against that schedule. There really is. And we'll just have to see how it unfolds. But right now, Miami and BYU look to be the two toughest teams on the schedule for 2026. And how good is BYU? I don't know. It's interesting because I put a post up on the board today about Notre Dame being out of the play or out of the bowl games and how that's impacted. And they showed a picture of the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which was BYU and Georgia Tech. Now, I didn't watch the game, but it seemed like, based off of what everybody said, that was the best bowl they've had so far. And nobody was there. You know what I mean? There was hardly anybody that was actually at the game. And so, anyway, I think that when you look at BYU, who struggled to beat, a bad Georgia Tech team, I just think that they struggled to score on Georgia Tech, which was surprising because everybody scored on Georgia Tech. So how good is BYU next year? They'll have some guys back. I think Bear Bachmeier is a much better quarterback than people give him credit for. I do think he's a good, solid player, and he'll improve just like CJ Carr will, and he surprised me in his ability so far. And so he'll be somebody to worry about. But when I look at the schedule, I'm not overly concerned about anybody on that schedule. And there's a really good chance for Marcus Freeman to win the national championship, or at least, go in there with a bye week. Because I think that if they get 12-0, they'll certainly have a bye and be set up to have a really good run in the college football playoff in 2026. Thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I did watch not all of it, but a lot of that, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly why the organizers were so upset, because they know that even Notre Dame, when the disappointment of not making the playoff, they still have fans that will travel. They still have fans from the area that will come in just for that game, just for the day, just to watch a football game. And BYU has fans that'll travel as well, but not in the same way. And obviously, too, Georgia Tech, like, it's just not a fan base that you're gonna have a lot of people out. They don't have that kind of fan base that's there, and that's why they're upset. I think you look at the 2026 schedule, and it's funny because I was looking at like all the schedules going forward, and really this is kind of like the last year, I think, where Notre Dame has had this like 3-year run of where fairly or unfairly people are criticizing the strength of schedule. right? Um, and it's just kind of how it worked out. I think a lot of it, like if you look at where things are, adding BYU, I think is actually like was critically important. Obviously, not just replacing USC, but BYU because like you said, Bachmeier's going to be back. They're going to be a good team again. They're going to come into the season ranked. They should be probably like a top 20 ish team again. I imagine they're going to be one of the best teams in the Big 12. So that is something that I think is important because you look at it, or like Michigan State, Purdue, like these teams, like they're still not going to be of that level where they're bottom of the Big Ten type of teams, right? There's a lot of those kind of teams that are on there, and it's going to matter more in those games that are important to obviously, win and look good doing it. And I think that how it's kind of set up for them, it is absolutely set up for 12-0. Obviously, anyone can lose a game here or there, but I just think about like the first game of the season when they're obviously going into Lambeau to play Wisconsin, and yeah, Wisconsin can be a little bit different. There's going to be things to new about them. Even though they're returning obviously Luke Fickell, but they're going to have some new players in there. They've lost some guys in the portal too that I've definitely noticed that. Like, but it's so different than with Chris Ash coming into year 2 and him coming into that situation where you're starting the season there with Mike Denbrock having a year with CJ Carr under his belt and all that stuff. Like there's so many different things there that is going to be not new compared to how it was against Miami. And not even to mention that Wisconsin isn't going to be as good as Miami was last year. So I think it's just one of those things where things are just kind of set up for them to really kind of hit the ground running. And then if you look at like going forward, they're not going to have a lot of these games where they're opening on the road against like a ridiculous opponent where Marcus Freeman got really screwed in his first 4 years. Obviously, like you open at Ohio State, you open at Texas A&M, you open at come on, even traveling to Ireland, which obviously that wasn't a tough game, but to travel to Ireland, then come back and all that comes with it, that's a brutal situation. And I think that now it's just so much different. I think they're going to be a lot better for how the schedule sets up this year and then kind of beyond that.
A lot of speculation that's out there right now with Notre Dame potentially looking at a running back in the portal. We've seen guys like Wisner. We've seen Hollywood Smothers. I saw Gavin Sawchuk, a guy that Notre Dame recruited pretty heavily out of Colorado, went to Oklahoma first. He's in the portal again. Do you think this is a need? I get that they may want somebody who's kind of a home run hitter, because when I think of Aeneas Williams and I think of Kedron Young and I think of Nolan James, I don't think you have somebody who can hit it big time like they had with Price and Love. But I don't think that those guys are particularly slow either. I think they're a little bit faster than, say, a Kyron Williams. Not much, but maybe just a shade. So I don't know. Do you think this is a big need?
I don't think it's a big need. I mean, if they could get somebody that you knew was going to be like that home run hitter, I think they obviously have to be open to it. But I don't think any of those guys are Love or Price though. Like I don't think
exactly
as good as Smothers is. Who would have traded Smothers for Price or Love? Like, or if you could get those guys back, you wouldn't. It wouldn't even be close, right? So, I wouldn't even call it the same. I'm not to say that some of these guys, I think, if they got into Notre Dame's system and they ran behind Notre Dame's line and all that, like I think they could be better than where they were. I think Smothers obviously wasn't running behind a great line at NC State, and he could benefit from playing at Notre Dame. But I don't think he's as good as those guys. And I don't think like the difference, what you would have to probably pay to get him to come, I don't think that's worth it. Like, I think you would rather spend on they got to focus on defensive tackle. on edge, on DB, you want depth or whatever, like on wide receiver. We know that's like, that's a need, right? So I don't see it as like it's low on the list. It's low on the list. I'm not saying that you would not want to take somebody that you thought could be a really, really good player. Um, I'm just not sure there's somebody out there that would be worth the price of what you would have to pay to bring them on. And I always wonder that too. Like, because I think about, if you look at like transfer portal and most of the guys, so like an Ahmad Hardy was obviously a transfer kid to Missouri, and he was great. He was awesome last year, but he didn't. I'm sure Mizzou didn't pay him a premium to come because he was coming from a lower level. He wasn't considered. He was considered a good player, but he wasn't considered like to be, a top guy, or else he wouldn't have gone into Mizzou. He would have went somewhere else. So I think there's just a lot of that. If I'd rather them almost take a shot on somebody, if they were going to bring in somebody, take a shot on a lower level guy that you think, hey, this guy maybe has the potential,
Yeah.
that you find like a gem that you think that you could add in, that maybe has a couple years, if you could get that guy into school, obviously, that could kind of like go there and just get thrown in the group and compete. And then maybe that guy, his ceiling is to be a Price or whatever, right? I'm not going to say anyone's going to be a Jeremiah Love, but maybe that could happen. But I just don't see like bringing in a guy that is just a top notch guy. Why would they do that when it would be so much better to invest in one of those other positions that I think are much more critical needs? That's my opinion.
Yeah, there's no question they have some needs that are very, very important to fill. It's interesting because tight end has been another position that a little bit of a surprise. When you look at it, Cooper Flanagan will be coming back and he should be healthy. When you look at the depth chart, Ty Washington should be back. You've got James Flanagan. We mentioned Premer and Frizel coming in. You've got enough bodies there, but I don't think you have a lot of experience. So I understand you want to kind of get somebody that can, maybe like they did last year with a Ty Washington, where they didn't have to pay a lot, but a guy just looking for an opportunity. That makes sense, but I certainly wouldn't pay a lot for a tight end, Jamie. I just wouldn't.
No.
I think you got enough. So, but I think if you can find somebody who's experienced, maybe somebody who has done a good job in the blocking part of things, but also has some not wide receiver, but some receiver ability, that certainly would help. But to me, I think to me, the biggest needs right now are, you need probably two interior players at least, and unless we know that Onye's coming back, and we don't know whether Onye is going to be back or not. So those are the two most expensive, I think, that you're going to have to pay for. A big, boundary receiver like Marsh, that we talked about, that's going to be a pricey pickup for sure. And then I think when you look at, I think a nickel corner, I think those are the four most pressing needs right now. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I would say that too, because I've been kind of like going through the roster and kind of looking at like, obviously we don't know for sure. Like some guys are maybes in terms of whether or not they're going to be back or not. So I can't like definitively say with all this, but I think what we can say about who we know could come back, nickel, I think, unless you just want to pencil in Dallas Golden, you think that like he is that guy. The competition there internally, it's all young guys. It's not guys that have had experience playing the position. So like if you say, hey, Nick Reddish is going to come on and we're going to develop him as a nickel, well, he's a true freshman, right? Like it's not like somebody that you have somebody already in the roster who has that experience, right? So I do think like nickel, yes, 100%. I mean, defensive tackle it's very similar to last year, Mike, where they have a need, but so does everybody else. So it's tough. Like I think, like the kid from Wake Forest, who's been mentioned many times, Mateen Ibi Ragba, that kid is perfect because he is a 1-year grad transfer. high upside pass rusher kid. Everybody's going to want him though. He's going to get a lot of offers from someone, and maybe because he's like a academic kid, he went to Georgetown, then he went to Wake Forest. Maybe it's like, well, he wants the connections that you would get with going to Notre Dame and going to grad school, whatever. Maybe that's a thing. But if it's not, then that means you have to pay like whatever amount to get him because somebody else is going to pay it. And I think about like the kid. I don't know if you saw the. Remember, there was the kid who's like 390 pounds from Ian Grefford from Arkansas, who he's up there and he's considered like one of the top guys available in the portal. I mean, Mike, he's a good player, but he's not a great player.
Great. No,
certainly. But people are so desperate that it's like that's what you have to do. So I think it's the same kind of thing. One thing we saw last year was Jared Dawson wasn't a name who was talked about as a guy who was a top guy. And I would always look at, when you look at, say, like transfer portal rankings, ignore them when it comes to the non-skill position guys for a lot of it, because I don't think the transfer portal rankings for this, like, I just can guarantee you that these guys from 24/7 and On3, and I don't mean no shots to them, I'm just saying they're not watching all 22 of these guys the way, especially when it comes to the line play. So they don't know who the actual top guys are. And that's what I think of, like, Notre Dame played Jared Dawson the year before. They played Elijah Hughes. They saw those guys on film and they were like, who's this kid? I guarantee that's what exactly happened. This kid is better than we thought. And this, and I'm like, oh, well, this kid's going to be in the portal. Okay. Like, so I'm not saying that everyone should go through who Notre Dame played last year, whatever, but it's not a bad idea to look at that kind of thing, because that's where you're going to get the evaluations of some of these guys, where you're going to see that where people are going to miss there. And Jared Dawson was so much better than wherever he was ranked as a portal addition. Yeah. And I like, and I went back and obviously watched him, and I watched the Louisville game that he played against Notre Dame and a couple other games there too. And I liked him, but he ended up being so much better. Like, he was better at the strength and conditioning program under Al Washington, Nick Sebastian. He developed more. I thought he was just a great fit there. And it's about kind of finding that kind of fit in the right guy there. And you got to hope that they find like more gems there. Cause I think one of the things that Notre Dame has done exceptionally well under Marcus Freeman is just get those guys that you don't think that are the Jordan Clarks, the Thomas Harpers, obviously those are both nickels, the Jared Dawson, those guys, and getting them there. I think that is extremely important in terms of like winning in those evaluations and getting those kind of guys there, because that's kind of given Notre Dame a huge edge in a lot of it, because they haven't had the highest ranked portal classes, but they brought in so many guys that have become starters or good contributors.
Yeah.
Like,
they've
only
done a good
couple
job
guys
of
have been
evaluating.
zeros.
Yeah. They've done a really good job of evaluating and finding value too. And I think you bring up a good point there about, so when Notre Dame's evaluating these players, they know how good Billy Schrauth is, right? They know how good Ashton Craig is. And so if a player can hold up against those guys, they're like, okay, well, this guy's got something, versus if you're watching him play against, I don't know, Syracuse or something like that. It's just not apples to apples type of situation. Now, let's be honest, Notre Dame needs to be on an apples to apples situation, because if you're going to play in the playoff and you're going to win games, you got to have guys who can hold up against the very best players. And so that's why it's very, very important for Notre Dame to do a good job of evaluating and find guys that have shown they have the ability to play against some of the very best players and win those individual battles. And so I think it's important. It really is. And we just got to hope that Onya comes back. And so, losing a guy like Burnham, if that were to happen, that would suck, but you'd have to pay Burnham a good amount of money. Well, then it becomes a choice of, do we pay Burnham because he's a known, but that's going to give us less money to pay some interior defensive tackle? I'm sorry, the interior defensive tackle is more important at this point than another pass rusher. It just is. And so
Yeah.
you really have to prioritize that and know where you're coming from. I mean, I think kicker is another thing. Here's the thing. I guess I've never asked, what a going rate for a kicker would be. I just don't know, but um, I would figure the number's probably higher in Notre Dame's eyes than it was before this year because of
Yeah.
what they saw happen. So, you got to make sure that you got somebody you can count on. And it didn't come back to really haunt Notre Dame too much. I think even in the Texas A&M game, it was more of a drop than it was a missed extra point, and so I'm not overly concerned about that situation, but I got to believe that Notre Dame will probably go hard after the Boston College kicker. Try and steal that guy. Certainly, he's been very, very good, but there's also other guys that are out there, and they'll be battling to figure out what the situation is. I mean, here's the thing that I've looked at, and again, we don't know because playoff or bowl games aren't over with yet. Some guys are deciding right now whether they're getting in the portal. They don't. They've been practicing, they've been home, this and that. So we don't know, but I'd say right now I'm not overly impressed with this class of portal guys and people that they can steal. I see some good players, but I don't see a lot of guys that I'm just foaming at the mouth of. I just don't. Of course, the guy from Wake Forest and Nick Marsh come to mind. I'd love to have the BC kicker. I can't really name a nickel corner right now where I'm like, that's the guy. So we just got to hope that there's some more names added here, Jamie, because I'm not overly excited about what I've seen so far. But I gotta believe there'll be more names popping in the portal here pretty quick. And once it gets active, of course, it's going to be a gangbusters. But it's interesting because I think, like at Notre Dame, a lot of the teams already kind of know who's going into the portal. They have a pretty good idea. So how many more good names are going to be added? That's the thing that concerns me a little bit. Thoughts here?
Yeah, I think one of those things too, that you always kind of like Malachi Fields is a perfect example of that. Was someone that when everybody kind of knew he was a guy that, well, that would be great if he went in the portal, and he's probably going to go into the portal. And then it just kind of led to it, but it didn't happen right away. And then obviously when it does, it was like pretty much said and done for Notre Dame right away. But that's just like an example of how someone can just kind of pop up out of nowhere, and or not even or how it's a slow build, but then someone else can just like pop up out of nowhere and get in there too. So I do wonder too, like it's, you just got done with Christmas. There's going to be guys obviously who are at home and they're talking to, parents, advisors, trainers, they have their agents and all that too, but like all these other people were in their ear, and then guys that you don't expect to go in, all of a sudden are going to go in. And I think there's also like a breaking point for negotiations with some of these guys too, that I think you're going to see. But I would agree too, in terms of just like the quality in the portal. Like I was looking at a list of like quarterbacks in the portal today, and I mean, there's definitely some good ones. But who is a lot of these guys, if you just plug them in somewhere, how many of these guys are just all of a sudden just like, man, that completely flips someone's roster around there? I don't think there's any of those guys. I really don't think there's anyone there, right? I
think there's no Caleb Downs in there. You know what I mean?
No,
there's no Caleb
right?
Downs. Yeah.
I don't think so. And I think that even if you said, like Chaz Coleman, who we talked about last week, who's probably going to Ohio State, I think he's got a chance to be great, but I wouldn't say it's like a sure thing that he's going to go in there and be like a first round pick. It's not a lock. And for a lot of people, he's considered the top in the portal, right? So,
yeah.
it's just different now. And I think too, it's a little bit like Greg and I kind of talked about it briefly. Like I can't remember if it was last week or a week ago, but it's a lot more like NIL and all this and schools and how they prioritize things too. There's less of guys going in because they're overspending to lock guys up because they know how important it is, rather than saying, hey, we're going to go and get somebody out there, because you don't know who's going to be out there. So the quote unquote free agent class isn't going to be that good, which is also another reason why, man, high school recruiting more important than ever. It really, really is, because any team that you want to just flip a switch and try to change things right away, it's not going to be the same as it was even a couple years ago, because now there's so many more teams that have just said, well, now we got to get our NIL in line, and we got to do this, and we got to invest more here. So then when they're doing that, they're bringing it up, and that means that who might have been in the portal before isn't going to be there this time. And it just whittled down quite a bit.
I'll tell you what's important. You bring up recruiting. What's important more than anything right now, and this is going to, I think you'll see this as time goes on, it's going to be extremely important that your top 12 is better than everybody else's top 12. If you've got a good top 12 in every class, that's going to give you a group of 48 players that are going to be the guys who are going to play every down and everything. And it's just important that you get, high level 5-star types of talent, that your 12 is as good as everybody else's, because it's going to, you can add a Nick Marsh, to your roster, and that's going to help you and things like that. But it would be better if you're not searching for a Nick Marsh every year. You're searching for somebody that's maybe a depth piece versus a starter. And so I really think it's going to be important to land some big-time players for Notre Dame moving forward. They did a great job of that last year. I love this class that they got coming in. And then, of course, I like where this new one is headed, too. You got to sign everybody. But what we'll see, and I think we've seen this with the current class, freshman class, is that some guys are going to come in the door, and you got a 1-year window to impress. And if you can't make that happen, you're going to be out the door, and that's just the way it is. So you got to make sure your top 12,
especially at certain positions, right?
Oh, certainly, yeah. You don't want to be in the portal looking for a quarterback every year. You don't want to be in the portal looking for wide receivers and pass rushers and elite corners. I mean, there are no elite corners that are going to be in the portal. They're just too, and people will pay way above what they have to, because there's just not enough of them out there. So it's real important that you recruit like that. All right, let's get to some questions from some ISD customers. Off topic for Notre Dame, but thoughts, predictions on how Matt Campbell at Penn State will go and Kyle Whittingham at Michigan. Plan B hires for both, it appears. My quick thoughts, I think Whittingham is going to be a very solid hire, but nothing spectacular. I think he'll be a 9-3, 10-2 type of coach. I just don't think that they'll be able to recruit well enough with him there. The other thing, too, is they've just never really been able to develop a great passing team, a passing game. And we've seen what happens when you can't throw the football at Notre Dame. We've seen it. So, I find it interesting that as soon as this guy commits, one of their top wide receivers decommits, I think that says something. And so to me, I think that that's something to think about with them. With Penn State and Matt Campbell, I think he's a good coach. Is he a great coach? I don't know. He's never had the ability to recruit like he could at Penn State. I think he's done a good job of evaluating and developing talent over there. I think he's done a real good job of that. And that's a big part of it. It's going to be a huge part of it moving forward. Can they recruit at that level? Can they, it's different. I think, trying to recruit nationally versus trying to recruit at Iowa State. Same thing I'd say with trying to recruit at Utah versus trying to recruit nationally at Michigan. It's a totally different thing. So I don't know. I wouldn't say either any of them were home run hires or excited. It's funny because I've heard the media just kind of praise Whittingham as this and this and this, and I'm like, I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see. But to me, I think it's probably the best either program could have done at that point as well. And certainly, I think they were safe hires. Thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think in terms of how it turned out, it was easily the best they could have done given how things went. Like Penn State could have done a lot worse after everything that happened. To end up with Matt Campbell is better than it could have gone, so that's good. But I think it is a question because he's never had to recruit in the same way, and I look at it always from like a Notre Dame perspective, Mike. Those are guys that if you're Notre Dame, you're excited that those are the guys that got hired there. I mean, in terms of recruiting against them, because those guys don't. Maybe they will come in and recruit well because now they have the brand behind them and all that, and they have more NIL money. Maybe, but I don't think that's a guarantee. Obviously, Whittingham, it's such a drastic. It's like not just a culture change from going to like Utah to Michigan or whatever, but like he's a good football coach. They'll be a tough team. They'll be physical. I have no doubt they're going to be well coached, all that kind of stuff. But you still need the top talent to really like, if you want to go far in the playoff and all that, you could still win the Big Ten. Yet, like you said, 9-10 games, you could do that every year in Michigan by just having good coaches and all that. And I'm sure they'll get guys do well on the line, but how they recruited, like they were finding like guys from like American Samoa who, no one knew about. And then they got them on campus and this, and then developed them and all that. And they were taking transfers that were like the third bounce back guy, but he had talent. And then it just worked out like the right opportunity there. It's totally different than at Michigan. It's so different. He's also, I understand he's not the same as like having a really, really old guy. Like he's 66, but it's not like it's not like having Joe Pa there or something like that. But like, he's not young, and recruiting is a young man's game. And maybe they don't need him as much as they get the right people around him and they get the right GM and all that. But I guarantee he's probably going to get a guy who's just like the same kind of evaluator that he has, and not a Chad Bowden type who's going to go in there and like be an actual lead recruiter. So I don't know. I think that could be, I really do see them kind of like every 4 years, maybe they have like a really good, like things kind of fit into place and then they make a run or something like that. But I don't see them being like a every year consistent. And the thing with Penn State is just like, it's so different than like, it's not just that he was at Iowa State and then obviously he was in the MAC before it, but he's a Mount Union guy. He is D3. He's obviously a good football coach. Iowa State was terrible for so many years. Like, other than a nice little Dan McCarty run, they did not have a lot of success there. So what he did is pretty miraculous. It's just so different, the kind of kids you're recruiting and all that. Like, even creating the culture, it's so different because you might get a guy that you're like, this guy's so talented, we got to have him. But he doesn't want to fit into the kind of team first thing that you would normally be able to get kids to buy into at an Iowa State. They might not do it at Penn State. So I think that one's going to be an interesting experiment to me. I don't know. I think of Brian Kelly when he went to Notre Dame, and you definitely called this, Mike, that it was going to be such a huge difference between the recruiting at Cincinnati to there, because remember he was like, getting the right kind of guys, the RKGs and all that. And every single one of those RKG lower rated guys, none of them worked out at Notre Dame. None of them. They just weren't good enough because those guys, and they might have been like good football players for that lower thing, but not at Notre Dame because those guys get processed out because they're just not good enough. They're going against a higher level of guys. So, I don't know.
See, at a place like Iowa State, you have to wait for, Iowa to get their guys, for Wisconsin to get their guys, for Michigan State to get their guys, because Iowa State was just a lower on the rung. And so, was always my fear with Brian Kelly. It's like when you're at Cincinnati, You didn't even recruit until December. You didn't have to because you
Yeah.
didn't know who was even going to be available until December. That's just the way it worked. And at Notre
You're
Dame,
stealing
you had to
kids from
recruit
Max
2 years
games.
in
Yeah.
advance. Yeah, and so it's just a completely different thing. It really is. And same thing with Utah and all these other places. I mean, Utah used to get in to JUCO and all these other places that you're just not going to get into, at Michigan. So we'll just see what happens. I think they're good coaches, though. I do think that
Yeah,
they
they're good
both of them
coaches.
are good coaches. Yeah. All right. Just your thoughts and feel on Freeman. Does he really want to be at Notre Dame? Sure, the money is great, but obviously something seems off. I mean, I think he does. I don't think he has a problem with Notre Dame. I just opportunities arise, and you have to consider them. And I think every coach thinks that the NFL is the pinnacle of coaching. I think it is. And you play the best competition and you want to prove because it's all ball at that point that you have what it takes. And again, I don't no clue what's going to happen there. No idea. I think I'm feeling, more positive because we haven't heard anything recently. So I'm feeling more positive about it. And hopefully that's the case. Let's just hope that's the case, and it needs to be the case, and hopefully that is what's going to happen. All right. What are your thoughts on Indy having an off season not modified like last season and getting off to a good start this next season? My quick thoughts. I do think that had something to do with it. They weren't able to kind of. They had to take longer to heal than a lot of other teams that didn't play as many games, and I think that was part of it. Therefore, you couldn't lift and do some of the things you did. Probably had some more lingering injuries that maybe some of the other teams didn't. But I mean, I think the real problem with getting off with a good start is you had a defensive coordinator who just didn't know the personnel well enough to know exactly how to call the defense. I think that had more to do with it than anything else. I really think that was the main issue. And of course, I think, in that first game, Mike Denbrock didn't know what he had in CJ Carr and knew or at least felt they had a pretty good defense. And so I don't think he wanted to do anything to lose the game, but they probably didn't do enough to win the game either. So that's just kind of the way I see it. Your thoughts, Jamie?
I think it's going to be a great help because I think one of the reasons why they had a poor evaluation of their own personnel was because they didn't have that normal spring that you would have. And so even if you think about, like, say, Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden weren't in as early enrollees. Well, those guys get inserted into the summer, and you have like Leonard Moore and Christian Gray and Adon Schuler. Those guys were like in and out of spring practice the whole time. You didn't even have a look at your real, like, full secondary working together. I guarantee, like, how many reps do you think they actually had all of those guys working together? And I know Tay Johnson had a good spring, but he wasn't working with Schuler the whole time. And he wasn't, like, there was Talich was in there, and Stroman was also hurt and stuff too. They had a lot of moving pieces there, and that's one of the reasons, like, Hobbs was getting way more reps and stuff, and they're like, well, he's doing well here. Well, he wasn't going against the full boat at receiver either, because Pauling was limited, and they were taking it easy with Greathouse, and Fields didn't come into the summer. There was just a lot of different moving pieces there that I think ultimately kind of hurt them. And Devontae Smith was hurt and all that too, right? Like, there was all these kind of moving pieces there that I think hurt them when it came to evaluating their own roster. And a lot of that was because of the leftover from the previous season and how much guys had to sit out. And I think that had to be done. They had to they couldn't push those guys the same way, but it did hurt them. It did hurt them. Yeah. And I think it's something that, when you're looking at it, I'm sure when Marcus Freeman is looking at, like, if they get in that situation again where they have that long run, they have to look at it a different way to be like, well, we can't have, hey, this guy's sitting out this day and that guy's sitting out that day. No, just like, These guys sit out all of these days, and then they get everybody working together, because to have all those moving pieces in and out, I think was bad for the defense and for the team in general.
All right. A lot of questions about this, and so I think we'll the next three are about it pretty much. With the end of the USC rivalry, is this the start of the Big Ten, the SEC not scheduling us past September? Does this affect the way you think about independence? More people asking about independence and whether that's a good thing. And I think to me, the way I look at it is, if Notre Dame goes out and wins the national championship next year, I think a lot of problems are going to be solved, right? I think a lot of problems will be solved. Notre Dame's recruiting will take an even bigger jump, and we probably won't get into too many of those 10-2 seasons where you have to worry about it, right? That's where you have to worry about it. But I don't think it's just 10-2 that Marcus Freeman would be worried about. If I'm him, I'm thinking about 11-1. And the reason I'm thinking about 11-1, which is really the most likely scenario in any given season, teams are going to trip up once a year. If you look at the history of college football, there's hardly anybody who finishes 12-0. It's the 11-1 that I'd be concerned about, because they have already shown that they will do whatever they can to move these things to where it plays against Notre Dame. So what does that mean? At 11-1, does that mean you don't get the bye week? At 11-1, does that mean you don't get to host the game? And these are all things that a coach would be interested in. And so, you would think in 11-1, you'd be a host, but who knows what the rest of the college football landscape looks like at that point. Maybe there's a whole bunch of 11-1 teams. So it all just depends. And to me, I think that's the one thing that if I'm Freeman or any coach in this situation, that would be the one thing I'd be the most concerned about. And so, does it make sense to stay independent? I don't know. But I know one thing. If Notre Dame wins the national championship in 2026, a lot of these problems will probably take care of themselves to where it's not something you have to think about a tremendous amount. But maybe not. I don't know. What do you think now with independence?
I mean, I always thought that they're moving towards joining a conference. Like, I just think that the Big Ten and SEC are just going to be squeezing teams out. And I think right now, it's in the SEC's best interest for Notre Dame not to join the Big Ten, because then that makes the Big Ten more powerful. And that,
Sure.
that's where I could see like Notre Dame staying more independent if they do have some kind of more alliance with the SEC, and the SEC kind of saying like, hey, we're going to kind of accommodate you in some ways to help this, so then you don't join the Big Ten, because we don't want you to there. Because I think that could be a thing. And I mean, and basically with like the SEC not wanting that, like ESPN doesn't want that, because that means that Notre Dame games are going to Fox and all that too, if they're in the Big Ten, and they're not going to be on ESPN networks and all that too. So I think there's certainly like some of that kind of plays into it, but I just think that how everything's going, like they obviously don't care. They obviously don't care about the group of 5 teams at all. And the ACC and Big 12, like they're just hanging by a thread. Like it's just like,
Yeah.
It's and the ACC is going to end, even if the Big 12 still exists. Like it is not like Texas Tech. There's all this kind of story right now. Texas Tech could get the doors blown off them in this game coming up, and that could be it. For then, it's like, well, so much for all that money. Like,
Yeah.
It's just, it could be as simple as that, right? So it's one of these things where, yeah, I agree with you, Mike. If they win this next year, yeah, of course, all that kind of stuff. Just like how they went on that run last year, it was like, well, no one was really talking about it, and they do get that extra money and all that kind of stuff. But there's just going to be so much. There's always going to be people who hate on Notre Dame for being independent, and I get it. Like, you should keep it as long as you can, but I just don't think it's going to be feasible soon, right? Like
It's going to be
2030.
tough
2030
yeah.
is probably the limit. Yeah.
I would say too. I think it just depends on like you said, if the SEC colludes with Notre Dame and says, okay, we'll play one of our teams, one of our better teams will play you in October. If they get that, there's a chance that they can stay independent, I think. But if those schools decide, like Texas saying, why do you even bother? Why should we even bother playing Ohio State? Why even bother playing these difficult games like Notre Dame? If they continue to say that and they follow through with it, it's going to be tougher, and we'll see what happens. All right, get to a couple more questions here. Let's see. Do you guys think there's any chance if Christian Gray comes back that he could be moved to nickel and have one of the younger guys play corner? What do you think there, Yama?
I mean, I think it's a possibility because since he has practiced there a little bit, they've talked about it. But like, it is one of those things where we've never seen them actually go and make that change, and I don't know. Like, I think it's more of like if they do it, it would be more out of like necessity to do it because of they didn't get the nickel they wanted in the portal or something like that. That's how I kind of see that probably playing out. Although, I mean, I wouldn't put it past if like Mark Zachary or something becomes like, well, Zachary's better than Gray now. Like that could happen. Like that is on the table. So and that could be the catalyst for it too.
Or even a freshman. Everybody says, "Oh, that's impossible," but they've done it twice now with Morrison and Moore.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we don't
Zachary
even know.
and Golden could play. So it's
we don't know if
possible.
Chasen Smith isn't going to come in and be
absolutely,
like, right. So there's all that. Everything to me is on the table there. But obviously Gray has. He's obviously.
I also think Gray was hurt. I think he was hurt. I think he
definitely was hurt. He's definitely hurt this year.
And so I think a lot of people are thinking of Gray of this injured player, and they don't realize that he wasn't healthy. And I think that look, man, when you're hurt, it's hard to run with the best players in the country. It just is. All right, Greg.
Fair take on Gray and being hurt. That's 2 years in a row, though, where we're talking about how he broke down and was ineffective, right? I mean, because it was the same thing at the end of the year last year.
At the end of the year last year.
Well, that's an important time of year, is what I'm
saying.
Sure,
it certainly is. Certainly is. Well, just and you just got to hope that it works out better than it did. But I agree. It's one of those things where it's hard to bank on something where it definitely has been, a situation. But you could say the same thing about Charles, the same thing. So, can we count on Charles to be healthy? I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. All right. I wanted to get to this last topic and get your thoughts, and we're just going to pick the bowl game or the playoff games here. I just want to get your thoughts on who wins. So, Greg, can you come back on and we'll close out the show?
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to start Oregon, Texas Tech. Who wins? Go ahead, John.
First.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to take Oregon there. I just think that Oregon, one of the sneaky kind of things is that they've been getting like healthier. They've had people coming back, and I think I just think
Moore is playing at a bigger level too. Dante Moore is playing great. I mean, he's probably playing the best out of all the quarterbacks right now, I think.
And I think that Texas Tech certainly has some good, they have good players, and they have some guys, especially like Bailey's obviously been awesome this year. They have a good defensive line in general. I just think the roster, if you go down to it, it's not comparable, and especially at quarterback, I don't think Morton's that good. So I think Moore is quite a bit better than Morton. So I'm taking Oregon.
I am too. Great.
Yeah, I got to go the same. They're kind of built for it, right? Like they're more seasoned for this sort of thing. It's like for Texas Tech, it's new, right? And especially like Jamie said, that there is I don't want to say a weakness on that offense. It's just not as it just, you can't count on it, and I think
Mhm.
not in the same way that you can with Oregon.
Also haven't played a team even close to Oregon all year, Texas
Yeah.
Tech.
Well, it was one of these things. It's like, well, Bailey looks good, but he's rushing against, Big
Big
12
12,
tackles.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what is that? So we'll see how he looks when he goes against some quality opponents. We've seen him go against quality opponents at Stanford, and he was okay,
He's
good
pretty
at
good,
times.
yeah,
And
but
yeah, good at times, but
not the
nothing
same as
amazing.
he is this year, yeah.
He's no, Bain or Messidor. He's just not,
Yeah.
or wasn't from what we've seen. Maybe he is now, but we just never seen that before. All right. So Bama, Indiana. I think Indiana smothers Bama. I think, I'd be surprised if if Bama scores more than 14 points. I think Indiana wins by 10. That's my thoughts. Greg?
I kind of agree. I also the weather too. Like I think Bama is not kind of built for that at all. If it's going to be wet, if it's going to be cold, and it's just like Indiana is, right. Like they're ready to play and whatever it needs to be. And so I think that the confidence that comes with going toe to toe with Ohio State and winning, the confidence that comes with going to Oregon and kind of kicking their butt. Like that game was only close because Mendoza threw a pick six, and then they threw a pick six, the game's tied, and then they go ring off 10 straight after that, right? Like they made the mistake and then they came and kicked their butt anyway. So I don't know, that shows me a lot. Even though Oregon was a little beat up at that point, I don't know that I think that was when they kind of started to get beat up. So I think a lot of Indiana, so I'm going to go with Indiana. I think your read on that.
I think they're the most
correct.
consistent team. I really do.
Yeah.
I think they're by far the most consistent team. They just are. Yama?
Indiana does such a good job on defense of like confusing stuff. Like Brian Haynes is such a good coordinator. I think like if you look at say like when they played Notre Dame last year, obviously it's a different team, but I'm just talking about the problems that they gave Notre Dame's offense. Like Riley Leonard had to be great in that game. If you go back, he was really, really good. And because Notre Dame, other than they had to get like the 98-yard touchdown from Love, and
Yeah.
they didn't really run the ball at well. But that's how it was on Indiana the whole year. Alabama's not going to be able to run on them. They can't run on anybody. They're not going to run on them, and I don't think like I just think if you're like a one-dimensional team against like what Indiana does with all their kind of stunts and their pressure stuff, like I don't think it's going to be good. So I just think Mendoza just he's good, and they'll score enough. I think they'll end up win pretty comfortably.
Georgia and Ole Miss. What do you think, Greg?
Georgia. I think they're just good right now. I think they've kind of found themselves. I think they know how they want to win games. I think defensively they might be the best defensive team right now. I mean, at least one of them. They have so many things clicking on that in front. I think Gunnar Stockton is like they're comfortable with him in a way that's like different than Carson Beck. Like I think Carson Beck's probably a better quarterback, but well, how do I want to say this? Carson Beck is a better thrower, obviously, but like Gunnar Stockton is a better quarterback. I guess I'll put it that way. Whereas they are comfortable with how he is going to win them games, and Ole Miss has that weakness on defense. They're just not as good as a defensive team as Georgia is, and that's kind of how Georgia beat them, right? I think Ole Miss is very good on offense, but Georgia beat them the first time because if Ole Miss could not get stops, and like if Georgia's doing it to you, it's just like it's just not going to work out for you. So I think Georgia's going to have their number in this game.
Yeah, I just think Ole Miss would have to play like a perfect game on offense because they're not good enough on defense. They just would need too much luck to win it. And I just think Georgia's just a better team. So, and I agree with Greg too. Like Georgia's defense, which was really not that good for most of the year, like the last like month of the season, they were really good, and like you could see them look more like a Georgia defense. So I mean I think Georgia, to me, like they'd be the team that I would, if Notre Dame was still in it, you'd probably at least like to face.
They're starting to run the ball better too. And, when Georgia can get their running game going, they're tough. They just are. And so I think I'm picking Georgia for the same reasons you guys are. All right, finally, Miami, Ohio State. My quick thoughts. I think Miami could give them somewhat of a game. But this is kind of the moment, I think, where Miami starts to make the mistakes that we've seen all year too. This is where you'll see Carson Beck, throw a few errant passes that he shouldn't, and some busts and things like that. So I think Ohio State wins. I think it could be closer than people think, but I think Ohio State wins. Start with you, Greg.
It's hard because Ohio State is not a good running team. They're not a good running team. That's the part that I'm struggling with here. I could see it being difficult for Ohio State, just like up front too. But like Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are just kind of a different animal when it comes to that for the corners for Miami. I do think like Carson Beck against this secondary is tough. Like that's the one where I could just see like a couple like defensive scores for Ohio State that tilt it. Because I do think Miami's defense is like real and really good. And so I'll give the edge to Ohio State in this, but the fact that they can't run is like a big deal, and it's been undersold because they did not play a difficult schedule this year. Exactly. Yeah, and like even like the Texas game, right? Like they beat Texas 14-7. It's not like it was a good offensive performance. Played Indiana, you put up 10 points in that game. So they've played good teams and good defenses and not moved the ball. And one was at the beginning and one was at the end. So it's like you can't say, oh, it was week one. At the end of the year, they didn't really do it either. They didn't look that great on offense against Michigan. So it's just like, to me, that's just kind of sitting out there. So I'll take Ohio State because they're a better football team, period. But I think they are – I wish Notre Dame would have had a chance to play Ohio State this year.
I do too. I think they would have won. I really do. And I agree with you 100% about their running game. It's just non-existent. And how good is this offensive line? We don't know. But what we also don't know, and what we didn't anticipate last year, is when Ohio State started playing in the playoff, they were a completely different team. They just were. And so are we going to see that again this year? They have talent. Their offensive line played way better than they did the entire year last year. In the playoff, they played way better than they did the entire year, I thought. And they weren't necessarily a great running team last year, but when it counted, they put it all together, and that's the difference in the game. So just kind of how I see it. All right, Yama.
I mean, I think Ohio State's going to blow them out, and this is why I think too, because
gotta love the Yama.
I'm not. Carson Beck is a fraud. He's a total fraud.
He's not good. That is true.
That is one 100%. Thing that, like, I think going back on it, and there's so many things you can look at the season for Notre Dame. Obviously, when you're looking at the what ifs, it's all in the first two games. Marcel Reed and Carson Beck.
How'd they lose
every
to both
Notre Dame
quarterbacks?
Those guys aren't good.
They're
not good. They're not good.
You know how you do it? You let them sit back there and not pressure them. That's how you do it. That's how you lose those games.
You know what? You wait for the ball to come down instead of coming and getting it. This is like, that is literally like the difference in the game, because it was a duck. It was a bad throw. It was a stupid decision that he made. And the whole thing is like that. Anyone who watched the Texas A&M game, Beck, the whole thing was don't throw a pick. Don't throw a pick. Get rid of the ball. That's all he's like that, which is why he's going to be just junk in the pros. He's not going to be a good NFL quarterback.
No, not
at
all. No.
He's just going to be a guy who's checking it down quick all the time. That's what he's going to do all the time. So I think for that reason, I think that, like, I just can't see him having success against Ohio State's defense. So I think it's going to be the same kind of thing against Texas A&M. If they do it, it'll be because, like, Tony or Fletcher make great plays and they are able to get some points there. or their defense does something like Messidor and Bain just play out of their minds. Could happen. But I think one of the things, a couple of things why I think that Ohio State's offense is going to kind of take off a little bit. One, I think Brian Hartline, not a good play caller. I think that was one of the things. He's gone. He's not calling the plays anymore, right? So Ge, I think, is going to have more influence. He's a better play caller. So I think that's part of it. The other thing that kind of didn't really get talked about enough really in the last month of the season, because they weren't playing anybody good until Michigan and then Indiana. Smith and Tate were hurt like the whole last month or 6 weeks of the season.
Fair.
Those guys are going to be healthier now. And just those guys healthy, I'm sorry. I mean, Miami's not covering them. So all they got to do is they got to make sure that Bain and Messidor don't ruin the game. And if they can do that, Smith and Tate will make enough plays and that they're going to score points. And I just think Beck ultimately, Miami is not a team. If they get behind, it's over. They can't play from behind, right? So, and I think that's what will happen too, because that's when Beck has to hang a little bit more in the pocket. He's got to, try to find something and I just think that's ultimately going to be their downfall. So I think he's going to throw 2 or 3 picks in the game and they'll lose and get blown out.
All right, folks, that's going to be it for the show. Hope you enjoyed that. We will be back next week. Obviously, the portal will be open and there'll be lots of fireworks and a lot to discuss. So be looking forward to that. Have a good weekend or good week, I guess, and good holiday as well. And we'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.